The scribes recorded every grain of sand in the pharaoh's world, except this one chamber, sealed without inscriptions, guarded by silence older than the pyramids themselves. And tonight a young archivist followed a forbidden whisper into that darkness. He learned why no one lived long after speaking of what was kept inside. Egyptologists often say that ancient Egypt was a civilization obsessed with documentation. From the earliest dynasties, scribes cataloged offerings, royal decrees, temple rituals, celestial observations, and even the exact number of jars stored in palace granaries. Nothing was considered too mundane to record. This obsessive need for inscription is what makes the absence so impossible to ignore. The secret chambers, the unrecorded rooms that appear in multiple pyramids and royal complexes, but are conspicuously missing from all surviving texts. No papyrus mentions them. No reliefs depict them. No priestly manual acknowledges them. And that is the first clue, because the Egyptians believed that what was written became eternal. To leave a room uninscribed meant it belonged to a realm the living were never meant to ritualize, remember, or even name. The existence of these chambers first appeared during the excavations of the pyramid complexes of Sekhemkhet and Kaaba, two little-known pharaohs of the Third Dynasty. Their monuments contained false doors leading nowhere, angled corridors ending abruptly, and most unsettling of all, stone thresholds polished by repeated use despite leading to empty, undecorated rooms. These spaces were later found again under the Step Pyramid, beneath the bent pyramid of Sneferu, and in sealed sections of the temple complexes at Abydos. Archaeologists could not explain them, but ancient whispers, preserved in fragmentary ostraca from labor villages, offered tantalizing hints. They spoke of the horizon chambers, the breathless rooms, and the halls where voices walk without bodies. These notes were never meant for official record. They were private scribbles by workers who suspected that some constructions were never intended to serve the dead, but the living kings who sought something beyond ordinary ritual. The story begins in the reign of Pharaoh Djoser, long before the pyramids reached their later grandeur. His vizier Imhotep, the architect who transformed stone architecture forever, was rumored in later centuries to have possessed knowledge borrowed from the gods. While these claims were exaggerated by a later myth, there is archaeological evidence that Imhotep oversaw the creation of subterranean networks beneath Saqqara unlike anything built before or after. Most of these chambers were ceremonial storage, but several were not. These were the sunken rooms, carved deep into bedrock, accessible only through vertical shafts and hidden trapdoors. No grave goods were found inside them. No offerings. No bodies. Instead, the walls bore burn marks consistent with controlled illumination, torches or lamps. Yet no soot accumulation existed, suggesting either advanced ventilation or rituals performed with exceptional precision and infrequency. It was during a modern excavation in 1964 that a startling discovery was made inside one of these sunken rooms, a single stone pedestal with a cavity in its center. The cavity was smooth, circular, and slightly concave, as though something had been set into it, something removed long ago. Residue analysis suggested the former presence of metallic substance not native to Egypt and highly reactive when exposed to air. The pedestal was surrounded by faint traces of resin, the same resin used to seal coffins and ritual jars. Whatever had been stored there had been preserved with extreme care. But the real revelation came decades later, when a newly trained epigrapher named the Pharaoh Kamen was granted access to restricted archives containing unpublished notes from the original excavations. She found a short entry written by an anonymous archaeologist who claimed to have witnessed something extraordinary. When the pedestal cavity was first opened, the air within the chamber shifted as though pressurized, and a low humming sound emanated from the stone floor. The entry ended abruptly with a caution. This chamber predates the burial purpose. It was not meant for the dead. It was meant to prepare the living. And the pharaoh was obsessed. And obsession is a doorway to danger in stories like these. She asked the ministry for permission to re-examine the chamber. She was denied. The chamber had been resealed, declared too unstable. But the walls of Egypt have always had listeners, and she soon learned that older excavators had spoken privately of other chambers, ones even more secretive, found beneath the pyramids of Sneferu. These rooms had no pedestals. They had stone rings carved directly into floor, perfect circles, too precise to have been chiseled by hand alone. Traces of electrum were embedded into their grooves, suggesting they once conducted something. Heat, vibration, sound, or material. No known Egyptian ritual required such architecture. She needed to see them. But the only person who claimed to have entered one was a retired foreman from the 1950s excavation. His name was Hassan el-Din. He lived in a quiet village near Dashur, and when the pharaoh found him, he was nearly 90, his memory sharp but his hands trembling. When she spoke the words, the uninscribed rooms, he froze. Then he whispered, "Child, those rooms were not for ceremony. They were for transformation." He refused to say more. But that single line launched Pharaoh into the greatest historical mystery Egypt had tried to bury beneath the sand. And it is from this moment that the true story of the Forbidden Chambers begins. The story of kings who sought powers no priest could control, and the rooms built to hide their most dangerous pursuits. Imhotep designed monuments to defy time. But there was one blueprint he never allowed to be carved into stone. One design whispered to be so dangerous that even the high priest refused to bless it. And deep under Saqqara, in a chamber no torchlight dared linger, the reason for that silence still waits, sealed beneath 20 tons of limestone. For centuries, Imhotep has been mythologized. The architect-priest, the healer, the sage whose wisdom was later worshipped. But archaeology teaches a more complex truth. Imhotep was brilliant, yes, but he was also ambitious in ways that unsettled even the royal court. He had a fascination with the liminal, the realms between life and afterlife. His earliest surviving writings reveal an obsession with something he described as the passage of the living into the radiance, a phrase scholars still debate. Most dismiss it as metaphor. A few, quietly, do not. The deeper Pharaoh came and researched Imhotep, the more inconsistencies she found in the official record. While the Step Pyramid complex is well studied, only fragments exist of the original plans for the lower chambers. In the few surviving papyri from later dynasties, Imhotep is said to have ordered the creation of hidden sanctuaries that shall not be named, for they house the trial of the king's most sacred breath. But what did breath mean? In ancient Egypt, the breath was more than oxygen. It was a life force, the spark of sentience itself. This was not funerary architecture. It was something else. According to surviving fragments found in the Middle Kingdom city of Cannes, there existed a suppressed legend about Djoser's reign. In it, Imhotep performed a secret ritual deep under the Step Pyramid, not with priests but with astronomers and mathematicians. The text refers to a circle of rebirth and a throne of resonance carved from the bones of the sky. For years, scholars dismissed it as myth, but then the pharaoh found a connection no one had noticed. During a restricted archival review, she obtained scans of rarely seen wall fragments from a subterranean chamber under Saqqara. The fragments depicted concentric circles, precisely the same pattern carved into the stone rings found under Sneferu's bent pyramid centuries later. This was not coincidence. This was lineage, a tradition passed secretly from one architectural genius to the next. Her research began to attract attention, friendly at first, then sharply political. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities controlled all access to restricted sites, and any inquiry into uninscribed subterranean rooms was treated as a challenge to official narratives. But Pharaoh was careful. She framed her work as a study of early engineering innovations. It was enough to gain her a temporary visitor clearance to the Saqqara archives. That was when she met Dr. Reshef Menon, the man who would change the course of her investigation. Dr. Menon was respected, but he was also infamous for pushing boundaries. He had been part of a classified excavation under the Bent Pyramid in 1998, an expedition that ended abruptly with the sealing of entire corridors. Officially, the site was deemed structurally unsound. Unofficially, Menon hinted at something else. When the pharaoh quietly asked him about the stone rings, he didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss the question. He simply asked, "Who told you to look there?" She told him no one had. She had followed the patterns, from Saqqara to Dashur to Abydos. Menon stared at her for a long moment, as though deciding whether she was foolish or brave. Then he said something she never expected to hear. "If you want to understand those chambers, you need to know why kings fear to be alone in them." He explained that during the 1998 expedition, The team had lowered themselves into a sealed room under the bent pyramid. Like other forbidden chambers, it was undecorated, smooth, and eerily precise. But this one contained an object never publicized, a granite monolith polished to a mirror-like surface. It reflected without distortion, a technology Egyptians should not have had. The monolith vibrated faintly when touched, as if responding to the human body, and carved into the floor, beneath it was the same concentric circle pattern. Perfect geometry. Mathematically impossible for the era. Menon told her they had taken measurements. The circles aligned with astronomical meridians, not the sky as it was in Sneferu's time, but the sky centuries earlier, closer to the era of Imhotep. The meaning was unmistakable. Sneferu had not invented these chambers. He had inherited them. Someone was trying to continue a secret tradition stretching back to the earliest dynasties. And somewhere between Djoser and Sneferu, the knowledge of its true purpose became restricted only to kings and one or two master architects. But then Menon said the words that kept Neferu awake for nights afterward. The chambers weren't built as tombs. They were built as machines. He described how, during the last day of their dig, one of the researchers, a young acoustic specialist, made the monolith emit a deep, resonant tone by chanting in the chamber. The vibration grew stronger, echoing through the floors. Dust fell from the ceiling. Their team leader panicked, ordered a full evacuation, and the ministry sealed the site within 48 hours. The acoustic specialist resigned weeks later. 3 months after that, he vanished during a solo trip to Luxor. His disappearance was never investigated. Menon leaned closer and lowered his voice. Whatever these chambers were meant to do, they were never finished, or the knowledge to use them was deliberately destroyed. Neferu felt both fear and exhilaration. She knew now that the forbidden chambers were not scattered anomalies. They were a system, a network, a blueprint designed by minds who saw architecture not as stone, but as a conduit for power. And she also knew something else. If Imhotep had built the first chamber, someone after him had succeeded in activating one, at least for a moment. Now she needed to know why. Every Egyptian king feared death, but one feared something more: incompletion. He believed the forbidden chambers were not remnants of an ancient experiment, but a key left behind by the gods themselves. In the night, he descended alone beneath his own pyramid. The guards heard the stone tremble like a living thing. Sneferu, founder of the Fourth Dynasty, was remembered as a benevolent king, gentler than his successors generous, a builder of magnificent monuments. But the official histories left out one detail: his obsession with the architecture of the unseen. While other kings focused on temples and ceremonial pyramids, Sneferu ordered the construction of 3 pyramids, each with internal designs that changed dramatically from one to the next. Why? No inscription answers that, but the pattern speaks for itself. Sneferu wasn't experimenting with shape. He was experimenting with function. His first attempt, the Midim Pyramid, collapsed due to structural flaws, yet its inner chamber contained an early version of the concentric stone rings. His second, the Bent Pyramid, included an unprecedented double-chamber system, with air shafts angled not toward constellations, but toward points aligned with Imhotep's ancient calculations. And his third, the Red Pyramid, contained chambers with exact acoustic resonances, measured today to produce harmonic frequencies that vibrate through the entire structure. Sneferu didn't want a tomb. He wanted a working chamber. We know from surviving administrative papyri that Sneferu had a council of the inner sky, a group of astronomers, mathematicians, ritualists, and overseers whose identities were not recorded in any priestly roster. Their existence is known only through brief mentions in quarry receipts and labor notes. Curiously, the council vanished from all records after completion of the Bent Pyramid. Some historians claim the council simply dissolved, but the absence suggests something more deliberate: a purge, a silencing. And there's one inscription, found in a broken block near Dashur, that may explain why. The fragment reads, "The king descended alone. The earth shook. We were commanded never to speak of what answered him." For years, archaeologists dismissed this as mythological exaggeration. But when viewed in context with the stone rings, the monoliths, and the precision architecture of the chambers, Neferu saw something else. Sneferu tried to activate the chamber, and something responded. The most chilling piece of evidence came from an obscure find in 1906. The personal scroll of a guard captain named Hapu, discovered in a private burial near Dashur. The translation was controversial and never officially published, but several Egyptologists referenced it in private letters. Hapu recorded an event during Sneferu's 24th regnal year. The king entered the deep chamber with no priest beside him. He ordered all torches extinguished except one. He carried a carved staff of electrum, its purpose unknown. The guards were instructed to seal the entrance behind him and wait for a signal. 3 knocks. If they heard nothing after an hour, they were to reopen the shaft. But they never heard knocks. Instead, they heard this, a hum like a swarm of bees trapped in stone. The vibration resonated through the limestone. Dust rained down. The guards panicked, but protocol held them in place. After long minutes, the sound shifted from a hum to a low, rhythmic pulsing. Hapu described it as the heartbeat of a giant sleeping beneath the ground. When the guards finally reopened the entrance, the king stumbled out, shaking, pale, and speechless. He ordered the shaft resealed immediately and barred anyone from entering the chamber again, not even the priests. For the next month, Sneferu avoided the temples, abandoned public ceremonies, and met only with a handful of trusted officials. Something had shaken him profoundly, but the most mysterious detail came from the end of Hapu's scroll. The king's shadow no longer followed him like a man's. For days it moved slower than his body. Most scholars shrugged this off as poetic metaphor. Neferu did not. She had seen the effects of resonant stone chambers on human perception during modern acoustical experiments. Excessive standing wave exposure could distort sensory processing, affect vestibular balance, even induce hallucinations. But what happened to Sneferu sounded different. It sounded intentional. By the time she finished cross-referencing Hapu's scroll, Imhotep's fragments, and Menen's descriptions of the monolith under the bent pyramid, Neferu had reached a conclusion few Egyptologists would dare write. The forbidden chambers were designed as experiential structures, places meant to alter the consciousness of the living king. Not religious spaces, not tombs, not storage rooms, not traps, mechanisms, hidden within architecture, designed to induce a state the Egyptians associated with divinity, the merging of the king's Ka life force with the eternal realm. If true, it meant Imhotep built the prototype. Snefer built the first functional version. Later pharaohs continued the tradition in absolute secrecy. But the reasons were lost, perhaps deliberately erased. Because if a king could enter such a chamber and emerge changed, empowered, or destabilized, the priesthood would see it as a direct threat to their authority. Political instability would follow, and so the chambers became forbidden, sealed, forgotten, except the kings remembered. And the kings continued to build. Neferu's research was now far beyond harmless curiosity. She was uncovering the hidden core of early Egyptian theology, the part never meant for common understanding. Worse, Menen warned her, once you see the pattern, you're already being watched. Because the chamber legacy didn't just belong to ancient kings. It belonged to those who still guarded their secrets. Some ruins guard their secrets with sand and silence. Others guard them with the living. When Neferu reached the corridor no map admitted existed, she realized the real danger of the forbidden chambers was what the pharaohs built, but who was still protecting them. For months, Neferu worked quietly, gathering fragments, measuring alignments, tracing architectural patterns the way a detective follows the logic of a crime scene. She knew she was close, too close, when her research permissions were suddenly under review. Access to Dashur was delayed. Saqqara archives that had been open were now labeled classified for restoration. Someone didn't want her connecting the dots. But Egypt is a country where secrets whisper through cracks in stone, and not everyone fears the ministry. One evening, while reviewing her notes in a cafe near Giza, an old man approached her table. His face was lined, his hands scarred by years of manual labor. He introduced himself as Abd al-Raf, a retired tomb clearer. Men who crawled into shafts and tunnels long before laser scanning and safety protocols existed. He didn't speak in riddles. He spoke plainly, I heard you're looking for the chamber, the ministry sealed in 78. Pharaoh froze. That chamber wasn't in any public record. Even Reshef Menon had only hinted at it. Abd al-Raf continued. I was there. I saw the wall that sweats without heat, and I saw what moved behind the stone. Her pulse quickened. Even she, rational and methodical, felt the weight of those words. He offered to take her to the site, but only on one condition. If you hear breathing where no one stands, leave your tools and run. They arrived at night, when the desert swallowed sound. The ruins around a bent pyramid cast angular shadows, and the wind carried the smell of dust and limestone. Abd al-Raf led her behind a crumbled retaining wall, where a patch of earth had settled unnaturally, smooth, compact, and slightly depressed, as if something heavy rested beneath. He brushed sand away with a practiced flick of his wrist. Stone emerged. Not just stone. A sealed slab, almost perfectly fitted, its edges marked with faint tool lines. This was no entrance meant for ceremonial use. This was a door built to disappear. "Help me," he said. Together they pried the slab up inch by inch until it lifted just enough to reveal a narrow shaft descending into total darkness. A rush of cool air rose from below, carrying with it an unsettling stillness. If a place has been closed for decades, air should smell stale. This air did not. They climbed down. The shaft ended in a horizontal passageway, so smooth it looked polished. When the pharaoh whispered, her voice didn't echo. It vibrated, as if the walls absorbed sound and released it back in a low pulse. Her flashlight beam caught something ahead. Lines carved into floor. Circular. Concentric. The same rings found in Imhotep's chamber. The same design beneath Sneferu's monolith. She knelt to study them, running her fingers over the grooves. They were too precise to be chiseled. The electrum residue glimmered faintly under her light. This chamber was older than the bent pyramid, maybe older than Djoser. "This isn't just architecture," she whispered. "This is engineering." Abd al-Raf nodded grimly. "You haven't seen the worst part yet." He led her deeper into the corridor, toward a door that should not have been possible. At first glance it looked solid, a seamless surface of limestone. But there was no chisel work, no block lines, no mortar, no structural seams. A flawless plane, as if stone had been poured and set like metal. "Put your hand here," he said. She pressed her palm against the stone. It was warm. Her breath caught. Stone buried underground does not warm itself, especially in a chamber sealed for decades. "Now listen," Abd al-Raf whispered. She pressed her ear to the surface. Nothing. Then a faint exhale, a soft, rhythmic whooshing, like breath passing through hollow chambers. But the stone did not move. There was no mechanism, no airflow. The wall was breathing. Pharaoh jerked back, heart pounding. But Abd al-Raf wasn't finished. "Watch the light," he murmured. He lifted her flashlight and directed it across the stone at a shallow angle. Shadows rippled along the surface, not random, but patterned, like faint glyphs shifting beneath the skin of the rock. Glyphs that vanished when she tried to focus. It felt alive. "What is this?" she whispered. He answered with a phrase she hoped never to hear. The priest called it the chamber becoming. Before she could respond, a sound echoed behind them. Footsteps. Slow, measured, not rushed, not hesitant. A person who knew exactly where they were going. Abd al-Raf grabbed her wrist. "We need to leave," he hissed. But when they turned, a figure stood at the far end of the corridor, a silhouette framed by her flashlight's edge. Tall, robed, rigid. Not a guard, not a looter, someone who'd been waiting. A voice echoed through the stone. "This site is restricted. You have trespassed on consecrated ground." The tone was not official. It was ritualistic. Abd al-Raf stepped in front of her. "You said the guardians were gone," Pharaoh whispered. His voice shook. "I said the priests were gone. I never said the guardians left." The figure advanced. "Leave your notes. Leave your tools. You will go now." Pharaoh's mind raced. If this was ministry, they would arrest her. If this was a cult preservation group, she might not leave the chamber alive. But the figure stopped several meters away and extended a hand, not threatening, not violent. "Go," Forget what you saw. This knowledge is not for the living. Neferu backed away slowly, pulling Abd al-Raf with her. Only when they reached the shaft did she dare to breathe. As they climbed into the open desert air, Neferu looked back once and saw the robed figure still standing in the corridor, watching motionless, as if carved from the very stone itself. A guardian. Human? Something else? She didn't know, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had found proof that the forbidden chambers were not merely ancient. They were active, and someone was still using them. Egypt remembers Khufu for the Great Pyramid. It forgets the night he entered a chamber older than his dynasty, one whose architecture whispered to the bones. And when he emerged, his first decree was simple: seal every entrance. No priest is to approach. No scribe is to record. What terrified a king powerful enough to bend nations to his will? The Great Pyramid at Giza is the most studied ancient structure on Earth. Yet one truth remains. Its internal layout is unlike any pyramid before or after it. Why? Khufu was not simply building a tomb. He was continuing a hidden tradition passed from Imhotep to Sneferu, a tradition of engineering chambers that did something. Neferu knew this from patterns alone. The Grand Gallery's impossible precision. The king's chamber's granite resonance. The air shafts aligned not for ventilation, but for celestial orientation. The queen's chamber with its mysterious unfinished niche. The hidden void discovered in recent years by muon scanning. All of it pointed to one architectural purpose. A functional chamber system designed for an experience, not a burial. Khufu's pyramid was not a tomb. It was the largest forbidden chamber ever built, and Neferu was about to discover why. 2 weeks after escaping the Dasha Guardian, Neferu received an encrypted email from Dr. Reshef Menon. The message included a single line: "You were right. They found Khufu's scroll." Attached were blurred photographs of an ancient papyrus, fragmented but unmistakably Old Kingdom script. According to Menon, a private collector had smuggled it from a dig near Wadi al-Jarf, the port Khufu used for transporting pyramid stones. The text was drafted by Mirror, Khufu's overseer, already known from surviving diaries. But this fragment was a missing section never published. It described a night journey. "We escorted the king to the House of the Horizon, where the passage is narrow and the breath becomes thin. He commanded that only the loyal follow. No priest, no lector, no embalmer. Only those who fear him more than the gods." The House of the Horizon was a phrase used exclusively to describe secret chambers intended for the living king's transformation. The same phrase found under Saqqara. The same phrase in Sneferu's lost inscriptions. Neferu felt the pattern tightening. Mirror continued. The king carried a ring of electrum and the rod of descent. The chamber welcomed him with a hum like ripples in stone. A hum, again, identical to the sound the bent pyramid team described in 1998. Identical to the vibrations heard beneath the Dasher slab. The forbidden chambers were not symbolic. They were reactive. Khufu did not construct them for decoration. He was attempting activation. The next surviving segment of the papyrus chilled Neferu. The king seated himself upon the stone throne. The rings around him grew warm. The air thinned. The light changed, though no flame was lit. A throne inside a resonant chamber. Heated rings. Air compression. Light alteration. This was not mysticism. This was environmental manipulation. Khufu's chamber was a machine of acoustics, pressure, alignment, and materials. Then the most troubling line. His shadow rose before his body, though he did not move. The same phenomenon described by Sneferu's guard Captain Hapu centuries earlier. 2 kings, 2 eras, identical experiences. Not hallucination. Not fiction. A reproducible effect. Mirror wrote, "The king spoke to something we could not see. His voice was answered." Answered? By what? The papyrus ended here. Torn, burned, likely destroyed deliberately. But Neferu didn't need the ending to understand its implication. Khufu had completed the chamber of becoming. He had achieved what Sneferu only tasted. This explained everything. Why Khufu's inner chambers were sealed permanently. Why no inscriptions were allowed inside. Why his burial site remains missing. Why later pharaohs lost the ability to replicate his architecture. The knowledge was buried or stolen or feared. Something happened in that chamber that terrified even Khufu, the most powerful ruler of the Old Kingdom, and someone was still protecting that knowledge today. The morning after receiving the papyrus images, the pharaoh found her Saqqara access card disabled. Her research profile had been locked. A notice awaited her at her university office. You are advised to suspend all activity related to restricted areas of Old Kingdom architecture. No explanation, no appeal, a warning disguised as bureaucracy. That night, Menon called her. His voice shook. "They took my laptop," he whispered. 3 men from the ministry. They told me to stop speaking to you. They said you've been asking questions better left in the dark. Nefera didn't respond. "What did you find?" Menon pressed. She hesitated, because she realized something. If the forbidden chambers were designed to alter the king's consciousness, if the chambers worked, then the priesthood's erasure of this knowledge was not merely political. It was protective. Whatever answered the ancient kings may not have been metaphor, or divine, or safe. "Neferu," Menon whispered, "you're not the only one looking into this." "What do you mean?" "There are groups older than the ministry, older than modern Egypt, who believe it is their sacred duty to keep the chamber sealed." She thought of the robe guardian in Dashur. She thought of the breathing wall. She thought of the patterns that stretched across dynasties like a buried pulse. Before she could speak, Menon added, "And they know your name now." Before the call ended, Menon revealed one final detail. When the collector acquired the papyrus fragment, it had one more line, just one. Someone tried to burn it off, but part of it survived. "What did it say?" Nefero asked. Menon swallowed audibly. It said, "No king enters a chamber becoming and returns wholly himself." Silence. Then, "What do you think Khufu became?" she whispered. Menon did not answer. Because some questions should never be spoken aloud, especially when ancient chambers are still humming beneath the sand. Some chambers hid treasures. This one hid a truth so dangerous that even the pharaohs feared to speak it aloud. The corridor beyond the hall of 13 columns sloped downward so sharply that Amisai and Nebuchadnezzar had to brace their hands against the walls. The limestone grew colder, darker, and strangely smoother, as if thousands of palms had touched it before, smoothing the rock into a polished sheen. Amisai felt her heart beating faster, but not from fear, from certainty. She knew this place. She had dreamed of it since childhood, though she had never understood why. A faint hum, low, rhythmic, almost like a pulse, grew stronger with each step. The torches flickered not from wind, but from something else, something deeper and resonant. Nebuchadnezzar whispered, "This chamber is not in any scroll. It was struck from the records centuries ago." Amisai replied, "That means we are close to what they feared." He said nothing, but she saw his jaw tense. The corridor opened suddenly into a cavernous hall. At its center stood a door unlike anything in Egyptian architecture, a monolithic slab of black obsidian polished until it shone like still water at midnight. No seams, no hinges, no visible means of opening it. Only a single line of hieroglyphs carved so shallowly that they almost vanished into reflective surface. Amisai raised a torch and read aloud, "Only the one who carries a name not of this world may enter." Nebuchadnezzar took a step back. "A name not of this world," he echoed. The priest believed that souls pass through many lives. But this, he shook his head, this speaks of something older than Egypt, older even than Kemet's first kings. Amisai approached the stone. Her reflection stared back at her, wavering in the torchlight. "Why does this feel familiar?" she whispered. Nebuchadnezzar hesitated, then answered, "Because this chamber was crafted for the bloodline of your family." She froze. "My family? Nebuchadnezzar, what do you know?" He swallowed. "Your mother was once initiated, but she refused the oath. She never told you because she feared the burden." Amisai felt her throat tighten. "My mother died giving birth to me." Nebuchadnezzar lowered his eyes. "So they believed." A cold wind, impossible so deep underground, blew across the chamber. Nebuchadnezzar continued, voice trembling. "Your mother did not die in childbirth. She disappeared inside this chamber. The priest declared her dead to prevent questions. They sealed the entrance and swore never to speak of her again. The world around Amisai blurred. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. So this is why I was never told? Why I grew up outside the priestly estates? Why I was discouraged from studying the old texts? Nebuman looked at her with a mixture of pity and fear. You were never meant to return here. But fate, his voice drifted. Fate has its own pathways. Amisai stepped closer to the obsidian door, her heartbeat pounding like a ceremonial drum. Suddenly the hum grew louder. Not from the chamber, from her. Something inside her chest vibrated in answer to the stone. Nebuman gasped. Amisai, your name. But before he could finish, the hieroglyphs on the obsidian flared with pale blue fire. The entire chamber trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. The torches guttered violently. The obsidian slab began to split down the middle, its surface fracturing into thin glowing lines. Nebuman reached for Amisai's arm. We must step back. But she could not move. She felt anchored, as if the stone itself held her in place. A voice, soft and distant like wind across dunes, whispered her name. Amisai, child of the displaced. She shuddered. Nebuman's eyes widened in terror. You hear it too, she whispered. He nodded. This is a chamber of whispered names, where the priest recorded the true identities of the royal line, identities that existed long before Egypt's first dynasty. More whispers rose from beyond the widening crack in stone. Hundreds, thousands, speaking in unison, not in Egyptian, not in any human tongue. Amisai felt her legs weaken. What are they saying? She whispered. Nebuman replied, breathless. They are naming you, accepting you. The obsidian door fully split, opening inward with the slow, grinding sound of mountains shifting. Beyond it lay darkness, so absolute it felt like a physical force. Then a single point of light flickered inside, like a star hidden in an underground sky. A shape emerged from the darkness. Tall, hooded, unmoving, neither living nor statue. As it stepped into the light, Amisai saw that its face was covered by a smooth golden mask, the kind used in funerary rites. But unlike any mask she had seen, this one had no eyes, no mouth, only a blank oval of gold polished to a mirror. Nebuman whispered, By the gods! I thought this keeper was only legend. The figure spoke without sound, its words forming directly inside their minds. One of the lineage has returned, a bearer of the forgotten name. Amisai felt her entire body go numb. Nebuman trembled beside her. We came only to seek knowledge. We did not mean to awaken. The keeper raised a hand. Nebuman fell silent at once. The chambers awaken only for those who are meant to enter. The girl carries a mark. Amisai found her voice at last. What mark? The keeper raised his golden mask toward her. The flickering torchlight reflected off its surface and revealed something she had never noticed before. A faint, circular birthmark at the base of her throat, glowing in the same pale blue light as the obsidian script. Amisai staggered back. Nebuman whispered, This is impossible. The keeper stepped closer. You were chosen before birth, as your mother was, as her mother before her. The bloodline has carried a memory across ages, a memory not of this world. The hum in the chamber rose to a deafening resonance. The keeper extended a hand toward Amisai. Enter, child of the displaced. The final chamber awaits. Amisai's voice trembled. What lies beyond? The keeper answered, the truth that even the pharaohs feared, the origin of their power. Amisai turned to Nebuman. He looked torn between terror and awe. Whatever is in there, she whispered. I must know. He nodded weakly. Then I will follow you. Amisai took a single step into the darkness beyond the obsidian gate, and the gate slammed shut behind them. Some secrets reshape empires. This one rewrote the origins of kings. The obsidian gate slammed shut behind them, plunging Amisai and Nebuman into a darkness so absolute it felt alive. The faint blue glow from Amisai's birthmark pulsed like a heartbeat. Not hers, but something older, something deep within the chamber itself. A soft whisper vibrated through the air. Not words, Not breath. Memory. Nebuman clutched his torch, though its flame seemed swallowed into the void. Amisai, stay close. She nodded, though she could not see him. She stepped forward, and the darkness recoiled like mist scattering before the sun. A circular room emerged around them, its walls carved with spiraling lines that seemed less drawn than grown, as if grown from stone in patterns that defied human geometry. At the center stood a single altar of polished alabaster, so smooth it glowed. Above it floated a sphere of pure light. Nebuman gasped, "By the gods, is that—" The voice of the keeper echoed behind them. "This is the memory of the first ones." Amisai turned. The golden masked figure stood at the chamber's edge, its presence still and immense. The first ones. Amisai asked, her voice barely a whisper. The keeper inclined his mask. Before Egypt, before the Nile had a name, before humans remembered themselves, they came. Nebuman's face went pale. The creation myths, the Zep Tepi. The first time. We thought it symbolic. The keeper responded. All myths are memories disguised as stories. The true forbidden chamber's purpose. The sphere pulsed softly, radiating warmth that seeped into Amisai's bones. It felt familiar, like stepping into a dream she had almost forgotten. "What does this sphere hold?" she asked. The keeper answered, "The knowledge the first ones left behind. The blueprint for kingship, the reason pharaohs claimed divine right." Nebuman whispered, stunned, "This is why the chambers were sealed. Why only a bloodline could enter. They protected not a treasure, but a memory." The keeper continued, "The first ones did not rule. They taught. They guided a fragile world. And when they departed, they left behind a single lineage tasked to remember." Amisai felt the truth settle over her like a heavy cloak. "My mother," she whispered. "She came here." The keeper nodded. She was called to safeguard the memory, but she chose differently. Amisai's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "The mother's choice." The chamber hummed with rising energy as the sphere brightened. Nebuman whispered, "Amisai, whatever happened here, you must prepare yourself." The keeper raised a hand and the sphere expanded, revealing shifting images within. A woman's silhouette, her hair braided in the style of the priestesses. Amisai's heart twisted. "Mother." The figure placed her palm upon the sphere. Light surged, then fractured. Cracks spidered across the chamber walls like veins of lightning. Nebuman gasped. She tried to destroy it. The keeper answered. She believed humanity was not meant to know these truths. She wished to sever the last ties between the first ones and the pharaohs. Amisai felt her knees weaken. She chose to forget, and they said she died. The keeper's voice softened. She vanished into the memory itself. Lost but not gone. Amisai swallowed, fighting tears. "Can I bring her back?" The keeper tilted its mask. Only one of her blood may finish what she began, or undo it. The sphere pulsed, responding to Amisai's presence. Nebuman placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to choose. We can seal the chamber again." Amisai stepped forward. "No, this is why I was born." The final vision. Amisai placed her palm against the sphere. Light exploded. The chamber dissolved into white brilliance. She saw visions flickering before her. Beings of towering height walking along an ancient Nile before humans built their first village. A sky filled with lights brighter than stars, descending like burning comets that did not strike. The first kings kneeling before luminous forms, their crowns shaped after the helmets of the visitors. Her mother, standing in the same chamber, face determined as she tried to bury the knowledge forever. A final vision lingered, a message from the first ones. Power is not heritage. It is responsibility. The light dimmed. Amisai opened her eyes. She stood in the chamber again, the sphere quiet in her hand, now small enough to cradle. It had chosen her. Nebuman's voice trembled with awe. "Amisai, what did you see?" She closed her fingers around the sphere. The truth behind kings. The truth they feared. And now, she lifted the sphere slightly. "It lives in me." The keeper's last words. The keeper bowed deeply, the first gesture of reverence it had shown. "The memory is yours to guard. The chambers will remain silent, unless you summon them. The obsidian gate behind them cracked open with a thunderous roar. Nebuchadnezzar exhaled shakily. Amisai, the world above, what will you do now? Amisai looked back at the sphere. Its glow was softer, almost warm. I will not destroy it, as my mother wished, nor will I let it be used by those hungry for power. She turned toward the path leading upward. I will keep the memory, but I will choose who may learn from it. Nebuchadnezzar bowed his head. You have become the guardian of Egypt's greatest secret. Amisai smiled softly, a mix of pride and sorrow. No, I am only its witness. The golden masked keeper faded into darkness as the obsidian gate sealed behind them for the last time. Amisai stepped into the light of the upper corridors. The past had chosen her, and she had chosen the future.